What's up everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing another Godzilla News and Updates Abridged. For those of you who don't know, the way that Godzilla News and Updates Abridged works, it means that I'm taking a clip from a longer video from one of my previous videos and uploading it now as an individual highlight. That way, if you don't want to click on a huge video, you can still get the news. In this one, we're going to be discussing all of the upcoming MonsterVerse games, so that's video games, apps, and pinball machines, and we're also going to be talking about the MonsterVerse being featured at an upcoming theme park, which is a very cool opportunity. Getting into what all of that means, a lot of this information comes to us from Licensing Expo 2022. But basically, it was all revealed that a MonsterVerse game was in development by 7 Levels and Legendary. 7 Levels is a game company. This is an action-adventure game for PC and consoles, so finally we're getting a big release of a MonsterVerse game that is getting the console treatment, thank God. Hopefully it's good, hopefully it's better than Operation Monarch, the Call of Duty tie-in. That'd be incredible, because I loved that tie-in. I've already talked about that a ton, you can go check that video out, but the bar is set pretty high for me. The game will be set after the events of Godzilla vs. Kong, which makes me wonder if it's supposed to be canon or not. I would expect that the game developers are going to tell us it's canon and that the MonsterVerse as a whole will literally never reference it in history. So it'll be one of those things that's like, is it canon? I guess to us nerds, but to nobody else. The description says players exploit the strengths of the Titans to traverse a crumbling metropolis on the trails of unraveling a huge mystery tied to the MonsterVerse franchise. As for the mobile game is a multiplayer online survival strategy game where humans must fight together against the Titans. I'm kind of thinking that's going to be a bit like Godzilla Strike Force, but with an online element to it. Or is it Strike Force or is it Strike Zone? I think it was Strike Zone. You know, ironically, I made this whole video where I was doing this news abridged and I never really talked about the game side of it all, so I want to get into it very briefly. It's really hard to speculate about what we could possibly be getting as far as games go, simply because there's a lot of variety and we don't really have any information. Now, I do know the MonsterVerse is doing that like weird tie-in kind of game thing they're doing where you have to like crowdfund it right now. I actually don't know a lot about that, so I'm not going to talk a ton about that right now. That's a topic for a future video, but I know they're passing that off as canon, and again, I'm just hesitant to call anything the MonsterVerse refers to as canon simply because the MonsterVerse has had a history since Godzilla Awakening all the way back in 2014 of saying this thing is canon and then never acknowledging it within the context of the movies. This does seem to be shifting as we're getting the new Monarch television show, which does seem to acknowledge and build upon the events of Godzilla Awakening, but I really can't say until that Monarch television show comes out. Godzilla Awakening might have nothing to do with the MonsterVerse, which would be really sad. I mean, would it? Because that comment kind of stinks, but the point is, the MonsterVerse tells us this stuff is going to be canon, and then it just really kind of isn't, and I think that's where the games are going to be operating. Now, as far as what the games could be, what I'm really hoping for the console game in particular, because the mobile game can be whatever it needs to be and I'll be fine with it, but for the console game in particular, I'm really hoping we have a dual campaign. This is something I have talked about since, I'd say around 2016, when people were asking me what kind of Godzilla games I would be interested in, and I'm not solely interested in a game told from the monsters' perspectives. Of course, the Godzilla PS4 game, which came out in around 2013 through 2015, somewhere in that range, that was, I thought, a very fun game, and I know it does have its defenders, but on the whole, that game did not succeed well. It's really hard to tell a compelling kaiju story that appeals to the mainstream when you're telling it from the kaiju's perspective. Now, I know a lot of Godzilla fans will disagree with me and bring up the Pipeworks trilogy and all that stuff. Hey guys, that's fine that we love it. I think those games are a lot of fun, but let's acknowledge here and take a little bit of time to ground ourselves in the real world. Those games were niche. They didn't have massive broad appeal, and they don't have a lasting impact outside of the fandom. So if we want this new MonsterVerse game to be successful and we want it to succeed outside of just the fandom, we want it to just be a great game, it's gonna need a great story, and in order to have a great story that really resonates with people, you gotta have characters that you can emotionally invest in on a level deeper than game developers seem to be able to tell stories with just monsters. This is where I think we have the perfect opportunity to build upon the mechanics that we saw in Operation Monarch. We are humans on the ground level with monsters up above us. That is such an incredible premise. City Shrouded in Shadow was a game which I thought had a fantastic premise. You're humans stuck in a city during a kaiju attack, and you're trying to escape, and your actions affect where the gameplay goes. I think that is a genius way to go about this upcoming MonsterVerse game. I also love the soldier aspect of it that Operation Monarch gave us, so I would say I would love to have a campaign where you are working for Monarch, trying to stop some awakening of some titans, and you're going around and you're trying to get people out of cities, evacuating things with G-Team, and then you're trying to take on Titans as well. That would be so much fun. Meanwhile, you have a dual campaign where you can play as Godzilla and the Titans, whatever that means, and you can fight monsters and do the big giant kaiju battle stuff that we all know and love, and that way you're satisfying both ends of the story. A way you could do this would be like what the Alien vs. Predator game did back, I don't remember when that game came out, but I remember playing it on Xbox. It was around well before 2015, which is when I played it through to completion. Now that was a game where you had an Aliens, Marines, and Predators campaign. So 3 different campaigns that you could either play chronologically, which meant you were alternating levels, or you could play it based on which character you wanted to play. So if you're a kaiju fan out there that has no interest in playing the human plot, you don't have to. You can just play the monster plot. And if you're like a story guy and you just want to play the story, well then you can just play the story as the human and you don't have to play the kaiju stuff. Or if you want to get the full picture, you can alternate levels and play both. Those are all great ideas. I really hope they implement something like that into this. But again, I'm expecting that this is going to be a game where basically the plot is Monarch is trying to stop the awakening of a big bad Titan. The Titan wakes up, does a bit of a city destruction. Godzilla shows up and stops it, just because that's a fairly standard Godzilla plot. I think Godzilla, in order to get him more involved in the game, will track this monster from place to place, and you'll get some minor battles here and there, and we'll revisit some familiar Monarch locations, and we'll build upon the lore of Monarch in the MonsterVerse. That's going to be my guess, and I'm also going to say we're never going to hear about it. It's never going to be brought up in the movies, certainly not in Adam Wingard's upcoming picture. So I don't have terribly high hopes for it being this canon project, kind of the same way that I'm really not very excited about the upcoming MonsterVerse stuff they're doing with Kong and Skull Island. I really need to learn about that project because I don't even know what it's called at the moment, but they're doing an upcoming project with Kong and Skull Island where it's supposed to be canon to the MonsterVerse. And for me, somebody who's kind of more grounded in the reality of the business side of the MonsterVerse, I'm sitting here saying they can tell us it's canon, but until a movie references it, I'm not gonna care. That's kind of how I feel with the comics. I feel a little burnt with the comics. I feel like the comics were hyped up to be this big canon event where we were gonna learn the deeper lore of the MonsterVerse, and they've really had super little impact on the MonsterVerse as a whole, and it's kind of disheartening. Makes me feel like I'm getting used and abused for my dollars rather than being taken on a ride as a fan. So I hope things change. I think the MonsterVerse is taking steps in the right direction. I'm very excited to see them make these shifts, but I guess I'm just saying overall with this MonsterVerse game that my hopes aren't terribly high. Finally, Legendary teamed with Zen Studios to develop a trio of digital MonsterVerse pinball tables with Pinball FX for both PC and consoles. Is it just going to be only digital, or is it going to be a real pinball machine? Digital pinball does not sound as fun as actual real pinball, so I'm hoping it's going to be a real pinball machine as well. As for Legendary's comments on these games, they state that as the MonsterVerse continues to grow, we are committed to furthering the franchise's offerings within games, whether it's mobile, PC, consoles, or VR, to give fans more opportunities to not only interact with their favorite titans, but to continue to explore this rich world. So that sounds all nice and fun. I'm all for exploring the MonsterVerse. Again, I have a feeling, and this is just a guess, I have a feeling that they are going to tell us these games are canon, and they're never going to be referenced in the movies, and they're never going to be referenced in the shows, and then eventually they'll get contradicted by the movies and the shows, and we'll all just go, oh well. Because that's kind of how the comic books work, and that's how the novelizations work, and we just kind of roll with it. Fun for those of us who love to dig into this stuff, but it doesn't really have that big of a bearing outside of it. So I don't have a ton to say about this because we don't really know a lot about it yet, but Legendary Pictures partners with Studio Aquintani. I don't know how to say that word, and I will never say it right. Maybe I misspelled it. It's French, I guess. Aquintani, I'm gonna say. Legendary Pictures is partnered with another company to bring the first official Legendary Entertainment franchise park to France. So you know how there's a Universal Studios and there's a Disneyland and a Disney World, and occasionally we'll get some sort of other studio experience. I think Warner Bros has its own studio experience. Basically, Legendary is making its own theme park, and featured at their theme park is going to be all of the MonsterVerse stuff that we know and love. This theme park is slated to open in France in 2025 and will feature Godzilla, Kong, Pacific Rim, and Dune. They're all slated to be featured. I don't know what that means. I think that there's some really cool stuff you could do with this. Let's just take a minute, take a step back. Maybe I'll make a whole video about this someday, but there are moments in the MonsterVerse movies that already feel like theme park moments. Kong Skull Island, that helicopter sequence, we've already had a VR version of it. That moment would make for an incredible theme park experience. And Godzilla King of the Monsters, that whole movie feels like a theme park movie in the best kind of way. That moment when Ghidorah's heads are all coming down around the Ospreys right before Godzilla bursts up out of the ice. That already feels like you're stuck on a ride watching this crazy experience going around you, like the Universal Kong thing that they do at the tram. The Monsterverse is ripe for theme park opportunities and theme park moments, and Godzilla has already had a super successful career as a theme park attraction over in Japan. And then as for Pacific Rim, you slap two guys together, you get them in the helmet of a Jaeger, and then you just let them be while the whole thing plays out around them. That'd be incredible. Who wouldn't love that? Ugh, I think that's gonna be so cool. As for Dune, I don't know. I've never seen that movie. Maybe they could be in the desert and a big worm shows up. That's what happens in the trailer. I think that sounds super cool. I don't have any plans to go to France, but if that thing is cool enough in 2025 and I have the money, why wouldn't I go and experience that? That sounds awesome. I just want to build upon the discussion in that last clip because I think there is so much potential for a MonsterVerse theme park opportunity. There's moments in all of these movies that could make for great theme park attractions. I really want to highlight how incredible it would be to sit down in a heave and go into the Hollow Earth, fly around, look at everything around you, have Kong attacking the warbats, all that good stuff. And then maybe you go up into the Battle of Hong Kong and you see Godzilla and Kong duking it out from the heave's perspective. That would just be so fun. And I think it's going to be a big missed opportunity if we don't explore the Hollow Earth in a heave. If you're making a theme park that has MonsterVerse attractions, that feels like a must-have. Another thing that I'd like to mention that I didn't mention in this video was there is still the potential to do something like the Godzilla encounter that we saw back in 2014, or was it 2013? It was a Comic-Con encounter where you had people moving through this evacuation zone and then Godzilla rises up in the window outside. And again, it's this idea that you're being put into the movies themselves that I think is such an exciting opportunity that they could really capitalize on. Of course, they could go the direction that Toho goes, where they just make a brand new film using the imagery of these characters, like a Shin Godzilla attraction that has nothing to do with the movie, or Shin Godzilla vs. Evangelion, where you just use the likeness of these characters and tell a brand new story. You could still do that with the MonsterVerse for sure. You could have Kong fight Ghidorah and Godzilla's there and Mothra and Rodan show up and you get the whole thing going on. That could be great too. But I think that the movies themselves have great source material for you to pull from already in terms of making an incredible theme park attraction. But that'll do it for this one, guys. I want to give a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for helping to keep the channel running. If you want to support the Patreon, you can using the link in the description below, where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man out.